Hey, it's Andrew. Just a heads up, this week on the show, we are revisiting some of our favorite summer reads. We've got some classic beach reads, family dramas, love stories, all kinds of books to get you through a vacation or for you to appreciate from the comfort of an air-conditioned library. Enjoy. Hey, it's NPR's Book of the Day. I'm Andrew Limbong. Kevin Kwan is on the pod today. He is the author of the hugely popular Crazy Rich Asians book series. The books he's putting out now, though, they're still about Asians who are, well, crazy rich, but it's a more transnational take on love and wealth and status and culture. In a bit, we'll hear about his latest book, Lies and Weddings, but first, I want to play for you this interview he did back in summer 2020 with former NPR host Lulu Garcia-Navarro. It's about his previous book, Sex and Vanity, and it's an interesting interview because, well, obviously the book isn't about COVID, but think about the mindset we were all in during summer 2020. And the conversation becomes a sneaky advocate for art that manages to, yes, provide some escapism from the everyday without shying away from certain topics that do affect us in the real world. That's ahead.
This message comes from Capital One Commercial Bank. Your business requires commercial banking solutions that prioritize your long-term success. With Capital One, get a full suite of financial products and services tailored to meet your needs today and goals for tomorrow. Learn more at CapitalOne.com/commercial. Member FDIC.
This message comes from Mint Mobile. Mint Mobile took what's wrong with wireless and made it right. They offer premium wireless plans for less, and all plans include high-speed data, unlimited talk and text, and nationwide coverage. See for yourself at mintmobile.com/switch.
The settings, a lavish Capri wedding, Italian villas, mansions in the Hamptons, and a mega yacht, of course. The love interests, George Zhao, a Chinese-Australian surfer, and Lucy Tang Churchill, of yes, those Churchills. The book, Sex and Vanity. It could only be written by Kevin Kwan, author of Crazy Rich Asians, and he joins us now to talk about it. Hello.
Hey, it's a pleasure to be here.
It is a pleasure to have you. First of all, this book made me even sadder about being stuck in my house. Capri is lovely, and I wanted to be there.
I'm so sorry. That was not my intention that people would have to read this, while they were self-isolating. But hopefully, it brings them a little spark of joy, a little laughter, and we can all imagine that we're at the beach, drinking a nice mojito or something like that.
Absolutely. Why did you choose to move away from the decadent, glamorous worlds of Hong Kong and Singapore and set this book mostly in Italy and New York and the Hamptons?
I felt it was time for me to move on. I mean, I'd written 3 books, over 1,800 pages worth of, this epic story about the young Shang Xian family, and I just wanted to try something new. I wanted to challenge myself. But I also wanted to do something that to me would be kind of like a little breath of fresh air. This was meant to be a light summer romp.
Yeah, this is essentially an homage to A Room with a View. It even has main characters with the same names. What made you want to update that story?
It's one of my favorite books of all time and one of my favorite movies of all time. And so it was always a fantasy of how could I retell this in a whole new way, with a whole new Lucy dealing with very contemporary problems. And there's a looseness to the storyline. There's so much more I could build from that, from the premise of just swapping a room. That presents the meet cute. But it was my way of really exploring so many other issues. And my Lucy is, of course, biracial. She's half Chinese and half very old establishment WASP. And I wanted to be able to tell that story of sort of the fusion of that and the problems and struggles it creates in her life as she, tries to really find her own identity.
Let's talk about the characters. Lucy and George meet at this wedding in Capri. Lucy spends a lot of time pretending that she does not like George, but we know better. Tell me about George. Who is he?
George is one of these classic modern Asian men. He was born in Hong Kong, but he was schooled in Australia, and now he's going to college in the US. He's going to UC Berkeley, studying environmental architecture. So he's very much, the hybrid of the modern Asian man. And he has no patience for the social fripperies of not just the Crazy Rich Asian set, but also the WAF set. He really could give a damn.
Lucy thinks he's an inappropriate match. She's afraid of what her sort of Wall Street fortune-bearing, waspy side of the family might think, because they might feel like he wasn't the right kind of rich.
Exactly. And she's also, I think, forced to confront her inner racism towards, the Asian side of the family, the side that's perhaps not as neat and tidy and as pedigreed as her father's side of the family.
Yeah, let's talk about that. Lucy always feels like she's too much of a tang, and she has to put up with people like her cousin casually saying things like, your mother is Chinese, so it's no surprise you'd be attracted to someone like him, meaning George. And these kinds of racist statements really affect Lucy and the choices that she makes.
I think for her, it's a lifetime of tiny paper cuts. I think the family is well-intentioned, but even in their good intention, there is this unconscious racism, that sort of has been infused throughout her life. And that's what she takes in. She doesn't see the love that they have for her. I mean, she just hears the criticism in her voice. And I think it creates a part of her that really wants to self-censor.
You've written this very fun, luxurious, romantic novel, but you don't shy away from race and racism. You really shine a light on it. Why was that important to do?
Using satire, it's such an effective tool to really explore subject matters like identity and racism in a way that's meaningful to me. But that doesn't hit people over the head. It hopefully will make them think, it'll make them laugh a little bit, but it will really hopefully, let people consider that, different people have different struggles. I should say, this was very much inspired by so many friends and even family members of mine who are biracial. I've grown up just watching, their struggles and their triumphs, integrating into the families that they come from. In Lucy's case, she had a mother that actually kind of aided and abetted and really tried to sublimate her Chinese side for the sake of her children. And that had its unintended consequences.
I want to talk about Crazy Rich Asians. The movie, when it came out 2 years ago, got a whole lot of attention for being the first movie since The Joy Luck Club to have, an all-Asian leading cast. Headlines proclaimed it would change Hollywood and was a major step forward for representation in the industry. It definitely debunked the myth that minority movies don't sell, but has the rest of its promise sort of come to fruition, do you think?
I think we're in very early days. If you really think of it, Crazy Rich Asians came out in 2018. And Hollywood, it takes 3, 4, 5 years to develop projects and really get them off the ground. I'm very hopeful. I have seen change up close. Last season in the TV world, for example, there were 6 greenlit pilots by the networks that involved Asian casts or casts that had a lot of diversity in it. The fact that a movie like The Farewell could do so well and that Awkwafina could win the Golden Globe, I'm hopeful. But we are by no means done.
Yeah, Crazy Rich Asians also set this other trend. I'm going to quote from an executive from a Bloomberg piece that I read right after the film came out, and I haven't been able to get it out of my mind. It's about how Hollywood was viewing pitches by Latinos after Crazy Rich Asians. And an executive at a film company said that the secret to making films with mass appeal for minorities is showing a character that people would aspire to be. He said, and this is a quote, if someone comes to me with an immigration story of the poor immigrant, I'm really not that interested. What are your thoughts on the sort of effect that Crazy Rich Asians had, or at least the way it was interpreted by certain Hollywood executives?
I think that's exactly what we don't want, quite frankly, because I think there are amazing stories, in every genre, in every age group, in every socioeconomic class. And in the classic immigrant story that, this executive might so frown upon could be something that's genius and beautiful and just waiting to connect to the rest of the world.
Kevin Kwan, his new book is Sex and Vanity. Thank you very much.
It's been such a pleasure.
This message comes from Amazon. Have you ever been so sick that even the thought of standing up to go to the doctor made you even more sick? Amazon One Medical has 24/7 virtual care so you can get help while horizontal. And with Amazon Pharmacy, you can get medicine delivered fast right to your door. You just have to make it to your door. Thanks to Amazon, healthcare just got less painful.
This message comes from the John D. and Catherine T. MacArthur Foundation, recognizing extraordinarily creative individuals with a track record of excellence. More information on this year's MacArthur Fellows is at macfound.org.
Okay, so by now, Kevin Kwan has a number of books about the super rich, including his latest one, Lies and Weddings. And in this next interview, Here Now's Robin Young asks him why. Why focus all this time and attention on the rich? And what can we take away from these stories if we, aren't crazy rich? Here's the interview.
Kevin Kwan's wildly successful Crazy Rich Asians trilogy was a deep dive into the world of the super rich in Singapore and China. Gorgeous clothes, exclusive real estate. Maybe you saw the film version of the first book, the hit of the summer of 2018. Then Kevin Kwan turned his attention to Asians living outside of the Far East in his new trilogy, which launched in 2020 with the novel Sex and Vanity, now the new Lies and Weddings. It centers, dear reader, around the young Viscount Rufus Leung Gresham, his mother, a former Hong Kong supermodel, his English father, the Earl of Greshambury, the family's fortune on the verge of collapse, his mother's plan, marry off Rufus. Oh, too bad. His heart is set on Eden, not an heiress. It's delish and deceptive. We're also talking about race and family roots. And Kevin Kwan joins us from the NPR New York studios. Welcome.
It's such a pleasure.
The book has sort of an old-fashioned Jane Austen feel to it. A family's fortune rests on a child making a good marriage.
It sure does. I was so inspired by her, but I'm trying to flip the script of the traditional narrative of how a woman must marry a wealthy man.
And there's something decidedly 2024. I don't know how you even... are all the dress designers and jewelry makers and fancy wines and stuff I've never heard of, is that all real?
Absolutely is. Meticulously researched.
Yeah, name some.
There are beautiful jewelry designers. Carnet, Michelle Ong, one of the greatest jewelers, I think, of her generation, is featured. Bespoke tailors, like Sartoria Ripense of Rome that makes beautifully tailored men's suits. The people that make the pillows for the Pope. It's all ridiculous, but hopefully it's all in ridiculous fun.
Well, it's all lush. But then there's also the lineage that you assign everyone. Every time a character is introduced, and there's tons of them, there's Freddie, CEE/Crossroads/NYU/Pepperdine. You take us through their boarding schools, up through their college education, saying what?
I think it's funny because in certain circles, right, that academic snobbery, that pedigree of where you went to school is so important. So I put it all out there from the minute you meet the characters, so you know where they've come from.
Well, then there's also these asterisks all along the way, and we go down to read a narrator, it seems, who's talking us through this. So, for instance, when one of the characters talks about a Francis Bacon painting, the narrator notes, at Christie's post-war and contemporary art auction in 2013, Francis Bacon's 3 Studies of Lucien Freud sold for $142 million. Who's that?
That narrator in this book, for the very first time, is in my voice.
Yeah.
In previous books, I've chosen characters to really represent, and they're in the different characters' voices. The Crazy Rich Asians series, for example, the footnotes are in the voice of Oliver, the sort of gossipy cousin. But this time I just thought, let's just go for a neutral author voice.
I felt it was your voice. And you say you've done research on this. What kind of research?
A lot of times I visit these museums, I visit collections, I visit jewelers, actual artisans that I'm writing about. Because for me, it's so important to experience it, to see it, to have proof of the product. Because I'm really trying to lend authenticity to each character. So the root of that is what they surround themselves with.
Well, and to the rest of us, it telegraphs, you can't even imagine this world that I'm talking about. It is beyond rich. And I'm wondering, our program has spoken to you before, and you told us that you grew up alongside this world. Explain again what you mean.
My family, we were not crazy rich Asians by any stretch of the imagination, but I came from an old, respected family. And I was growing up at a time when there were people I knew that when I went to school with, classmates and friends and family friends that were suddenly, their wealth was exponentializing. And you were seeing that in real time. Seeing that has long, long fascinated me.
Yeah. Well, and did anyone ever lose a fortune as catastrophically as the family here?
Absolutely, because you would see the flip side too. You would see the flip side of fortunes made and lost almost seemingly overnight.
Yeah. Well, talk more about the women. As you said, you flipped things a little bit here from Jane Austen. And you have the character Eden, maybe something like you. Her dad, Thomas, is the doctor to this very wealthy family, so they live on a cottage, and she's grown up with these very wealthy kids. She's a doctor with England's National Health Service. She has this grounded feel about her that the very, very wealthy children of the Gresham family don't seem to have. She reminds us a little of Rachel, the heroine of Crazy Rich Asians. Is she a little bit you too, this person on the periphery?
I think she's probably much smarter. And, she's our way in, right? She is the normal person in the midst of these crazy people.
Do you hear from readers who are saying, well, wait a second, you've been portraying Asians, and even though you have characters like Rachel and Eden, you've been portraying this slice of the Asian world that's so super wealthy. What do you say to that it's somewhat belittling of these crazy rich Asians?
I look at the great literary tradition that exists before me, right? And if you look at Western writers, quote unquote, right, most of these stories that are being told throughout history have been centered on the wealthy and the powerful, starting from Jane Austen to Anthony Trollope to Henry James to Edith Wharton to Tom Wolfe in modern times to Dominic Dunn. The list is long. Privilege, power, wealth has always fascinated people in literature. And I'm just showing a different facet of it. I'm showing that from the Asian point of view. But I'm also showing the complexity of all this as Asia collides with the West and people intermarry and migrate and move. I haven't really gotten that much criticism about that aspect. But I have recently met a lot of readers who feel seen. Biracial, Eurasians, they feel like no one's writing about us and the complexity of our experience existing between two cultures, being British and Chinese. And so I'm trying to give voice to that.
Well, let's talk more about how you explore race in the book. You have Eden, fully Chinese, when she goes with this wild family, the Greshams, to Hawaii, where they seem to have bought every flower and every ounce of expensive liquor and, to have this unbelievable over-the-top wedding in Hawaii. She keeps being mistaken for the help.
For her, it's an epiphany because she doesn't realize until she comes to Hawaii how privileged she herself has been. She grew up in this little bubble, in this perfect English village, being Chinese. But because of her association with this family, she hasn't experienced the degree of prejudice until she goes to Hawaii and people mistake her for hotel staff.
Also, it becomes clear that one of the reasons that Rufus's mother can't stand the idea of her as a daughter-in-law is that she's too Chinese. Rufus's mother is Chinese, but married again an Englishman. And just this idea of Hapa, I think it is, half Asian.
Exactly. I grew up with Hapa relatives and Hapa friends, and I would see the sort of innate paradox of their lives and the struggle for their own identities. And so I wanted to explore that more fully in this book to really showcase that. So, there's all these complexities of race, of where you belong that permeate the book.
Yeah. Look, you definitely have a solid career as a novelist. Time magazine named you one of the 100 most influential people in the world in 2018. What do you think that means? Influential how? What do you feel maybe a responsibility for, or what do you think that means?
It's honoring and also baffling, I feel. And I can't really dissect it because if I have to really think about it that deeply, it would scare the hell out of me. I try to write books that really amuse people, that take them for a ride, but also perhaps make them think beyond just the surface. You lure them in with the candy, with the great food, with the travel, with the drama. But hopefully you see many levels of issues that are explored within my books as well.
Yeah. By the way, what's next? Is this something you stay with because why not? Are you going to mine this vein as long as you can?
Really only for one more novel. I conceived this book. It's the second of a trilogy, which I call the Cities Trilogy, in which I pay homage to a major city in each book. So the first one of this series was my last novel, Sex and Vanity, which was the New York story. This one, Lies and Weddings, to me is a Valentine to London and to England. And the last book in that trilogy is going to be set in Paris. But beyond that, I really do want to stretch my wings and write about the other 99%. I think I would like to explore other territories beyond just this 1% very privileged world.
Meantime, you get to do your research in Paris.
Hopefully.
Yeah. Kevin Kwan's new book, Lies and Weddings. Kevin, thank you. As always, thank you.
It's always such a pleasure. Thanks.
That's it for this week on NPR's Book of the Day. If you want more, you can sign up for our newsletter, npr.org/newsletter/books. I'm Andrew Limbong. The podcast is produced by Isabel Gomez-Sarmiento and edited by Megan Sullivan. Our founding editor is Petra Mayer. The show elements for this week were produced and edited by Rina Advani, Jacob Conrad, Lindsay Toddy, Samantha Balbin, Melissa Gray, Ed McNulty, Rina Advani, Monty Karana, Barry Hardiman, Emiko Tamagawa, and Todd Munt. Beth Donovan is our managing editor. Thanks for listening.
Support for this podcast and the following message come from Delta, committed to the communities where their employees live, work, and serve. Delta First Officer Pilot Monique Grayson shares why she believes in the value of giving back.
Volunteering helps because it gives you an opportunity to see a different perspective. There's so much in the world that we'll miss. But when you take a moment to spend time with somebody else, to pour into somebody else, your perspective changes. You start to see the importance of being the change you want to see in the world. It helps people reach their goals when you have someone showing that they care. And when people feel cared for, they perform differently. Their confidence changes. This person is supporting me. And then not only that, it holds them accountable too. Because if the person that's supporting you is in a position where you want to be at, let me go ahead and put my best foot forward. At least that's how I would think about it.
Delta, committed to giving back for 100 years.